Okay, so now let's start introducing ourselves to PHP. The first thing is PHP is a HTML embedded scripting language. That means PHP and HTML code intermingles in the same file. To add a PHP code to a page, what we have to do is we have to place the PHP code within the PHP tags. So there will be a block in the HTML code just looking like this with the brace and then an interrogation sign and PHP, and then it will be closed by another interrogation sign and the closing brace. And then we have to name the file with the PHP extension. Let me show you one example. So we can start with a basic HTML document. So we can just create an HTML document. As you can see, this is an HTML document. So this one has these sections. This one has this head section. Sorry. This one has this head section, as you can see. And then it has this body section, right? And this whole thing is actually an HTML file. Okay, so we start with an HTML file. And then inside that HTML file, what we have to do is before the closing body tag, we have to insert this part. So this is the PHP block. And we can now save the file as first.php. And then we can run it. So let's take a look. So this was my initial HTML script, right? This was my initial HTML script. The only thing that I did is to convert it into a PHP document. What I did is you see, this is the body part, right? So this is the body part of the HTML document. So the only change that I did is I inserted this PHP block. And there is nothing inside the PHP block now. And now I can rename this file as first.php, and then we will actually see our first PHP file. So go to file, new HTML file, first.html. Set the textbook folder and finish. Now you see we have a standard HTML file. I want to convert this into a PHP file, right? So if I go to my textbook folder, you see this file, right? First.html. So to convert this into a PHP file, what I have to do is I have to put a PHP block and then save this one. And go here and let's change the extension to php.php. And now if I double click on it, it's not going to be executed. So the way to execute it is through this web server, right? So I have to tell the web server that there is a PHP script and you need to execute it. So we know that the local web server address is localhost. So I have to tell it that there is a folder textbook, and inside textbook there is a file first.php. So if I just type this address, is going to execute the PHP file. Now the PHP file doesn't have anything, so it's not showing anything. So let's do this. Let's refresh this. And the first.php is here. Let's put something inside it. Let's say inside the body. This is my first HTML or PHP file, right? So this is just a line I'm typing. So I'm saving it and rerunning this. And now you see you have this line being displayed. So this is my first PHP file. And as you can see, there is nothing inside the PHP block. The only thing is this PHP block ensures that this is a PHP file. Now, a few things that you need to consider for debugging purposes. If you don't see any result in the example that I showed you, that first thing that you have to make sure that that your PHP installation is working, it was installed properly. And then the second thing is you have to run the PHP through the URL. Remember, I typed the full address like through the localhost / textbook / something first.php, right? So that is, you have to make sure that you are doing that. Otherwise, just double clicking or uh, to open the file just will open the file. It's not going to execute the PHP document. If you see something in the file not found, you likely have put the file in the wrong directory or mistyped the file's name. So if I show you here, if the web server was not running, then the server is unreachable. So if I click on this, if I just type this, or let's put HTTPS on the front, is the same thing. Let's see what happens. So it says site can't be reached. The reason behind that is the web server is not running. And then if I put the wrong address, say localhost, and then say I don't put the textbook, then it will say file is not found. Okay, so let's talk about two of the functions. First two functions that we want to learn from PHP. These two are built-in functions. One is echo and the other one is print. Now both of these functions actually do the same thing. So basically you can understand that they actually print things, both echo and print. The format is you put echo and then you put a string. That means you have to put some words inside the single quote or double quote. Or you can do the same thing, print inside the single quote or double quote. Now, PHP is case insensitive when it comes to the function name. So if you write echo with caps, still it's going to do the same thing. So let me show you an example. Here is one example with PHP file, and you see here that this echo function is being called inside the PHP block. So this is a built-in function. So this block is going to recognize what this function is doing and is typing this whole thing inside the double quotes. So if this file name is first html.php. So if I do first html.php inside the textbook folder, you'll see this one says test HTML file, hello world. Both of these things are now being displayed, right? And if I change this to this, it still is going to work. So you see the same result. So next thing, let's say we want to print on my page, I want to print something like this. Say, she said, how are you? I want to print something like this. So how do I do this, right? So if I want to print something like this, how I am going to do it? Obviously, probably what I'm going to do is I may try with this, right? Because whatever I'm going to print, I want to put it inside a double quote or single quote, right? But that will actually cause error. Let me show you the example here. So you see, I have this thing, right? And if I execute this, if I execute this, you see, so this is, okay, so this was first html.php. If I execute this, it will show a parse error. So what was the error? Let's see what's happening here. Basically, PHP is now failing to parse it. It doesn't know where the string, which one is actually a double quote and which one is the beginning of the string. So this one indicates the beginning of the string, where this one is a character that I want to print, right? So there are two solutions for this. The first one is I can use this escape character in front of this double quote. So this one tells the compiler that, oh, hey, there is a escape character in front of this double quote. That means this double quote is actually a character. It doesn't indicate the beginning of the string. Or the other way I can do it is I can put the whole thing inside a single quote. So this one is beginning of the string. Now it knows this is the beginning of the string. It will only end once it reaches the end of the string. And whatever is inside, it will just print it, right? So these are the two solutions. So let's see if I just use, say, this. And if I run this, now you will see like she said, how are you? Okay. Or the other way is I just put single quotes here, the beginning and the end. And now it will also recognize these characters. So I save this and run it, and it's going to show me the same result. Okay, so next, I already showed you some examples using the echo. The other functionality of echo is echo can send HTML to your browser. So what it means is, let's say something like this. Let's copy this and let's put it here. Okay, now let's remove this line. And if I run this now, you see hello world. And it's interesting that here I have sent this whole thing, right? So instead of a string, what I'm going to do is I am putting some string and also some HTML tags, right? So basically, this is telling the browser once, actually the browser is now intelligent enough. So once it finds this, it will convert it into an HTML code and just print hello and world in the bold letters because it's inside the strong tags. Right? So echo function is also used to send HTML code to the browser. If you go and check the code for this, you see these strong ones is now inside the body, right? So this is an interesting functionality of echo function. So you execute this and the resultant HTML file that is going to be shown on your browser will identify these HTML tags and show it accordingly. Okay, so next let's do some debugging. So if you see there is some problem with your HTML, then just look at the source of your page and looking for the HTML problems. So the same way we did it. So if you see any problem here, you can just look at the source and see if there is any problem. Say if I have something like this, control. Okay. If I had something like this, then if I run this, obviously you see hello and then you cannot see anything. The reason behind it is if you look at this, now you can identify, hey, there was problem here, right? Okay, let's fix this. And the next problem, the another one is if some kind of error occurs, but display error is turned off in your PHP configuration, nothing is shown. So let me show you one example. Okay, so if I just say copy this and put it here. So let's run it on the browser. And now you see, we can see some error. The reason we are seeing this error, we can find it. The first reason is we have some invalid characters here. So although this character looks like a double quote, actually it is not. I have noticed this. If I copy this from the PowerPoint, then this becomes an invalid. This is copied as an invalid character. The valid one looks different. So this is the valid one. So that's the reason we are seeing the error. The other reason the error is visible is if I go to php.ini, this display errors is turned on. So now let's see if it was turned off, what we would have seen. So we save this, change it to off, save it, and then we stop the server and start again. That way it fetches the new value. That means display error parameter is now off. And now if I run the same script, you see it says the page isn't working. So this is another debugging thing. Say you run your PHP script and the server is on and still the page isn't working. One reason might be that there's some kind of error happening, but the display error parameter is off, so you cannot see the error. So let's turn it on. In that case, turn it on and then restart your server. So stop and start again. So this will fetch the new value and then run it. And now you can see the cursor, right? Okay, let's fix it. So this invalid character, let's fix it with a valid double quote. And now if I run it, it will show you the sentence. Okay, so there goes the other debugging technique. And then we showed you the utility of echo, that echo can actually send HTML code to the browser. So if I do it one more time, we copy this. And this one, let's make sure that this is not an invalid one again. Yes, this was an invalid character. So this time you see that this is sending this string to the browser. And inside this, there is a paragraph and also a bold word. Let's run it. Yeah, so hello world. So going back, the next thing that we're learning is writing comments. How do we write comments? There are different ways to write comments in PHP. One is just using this format, using 2 slashes. Okay, so this using 2 backslashes. This is a common technique also used in other languages. The other one is using this hash. Okay, and the third way is commenting multiple lines. So the first two are like commenting in the single line. Either you can use double backslash or you can use hash, or you can use this backslash and then star and then star and backslash. Okay, so this is for multiple lines. This one is also common in other programming languages. You can see this C and other programming languages. So you can see, like, if I just put it, see in the example here, if I put it here, save it, and nothing should be visible, right? So there is nothing to be printed. So if I run it again, you see there is nothing because that was just a comment. Okay, so let's talk about PHP variables next. So what are the variables? So if you're familiar with different programming languages, you already know what variables are. So it's the same thing in PHP, the definition of variables. The variables are used to store and access data in computer memory. So you can assign different values to the variables, and as long as you are in the same session or you are running your program, those values are going to be saved in the computer memory, which you can use. So a variable is identified by a variable name. A variable name is a label used within a script to refer to the data, right? So for example, here is a variable name cost, and you assign it a value. And then there is another variable name months, and you assign it a value. Okay, so in PHP there are like 8 kind of variables. So the first 4 variables are scalar variables. So by scalar we mean that it's so this is scalar. That means they have single value, right? So Boolean variable can be like true or false. Integer value can be anything, say 10, 15, right? Floating point can be just 10.1. String is something like my name, right? Uh, and then we have these two, arrays and objects. These are like multi-valued or non-scalar. So non-scalar or multi-valued. And then comes the resources. So the resources are you will see them when we interact with databases. So remember, we will use them when we interact with MySQL. And finally, null, which is a special type with no value. Okay, so these are the 8 kind of variables that are used in PHP. Assigning values to the variables. Obviously, if you have a variable, you can assign value to it. So say here we have a variable days, we assign value 3 to it. And then we have another variable new days, which we assign value 100 to it. And next what we do is we assign the value of new days to days. So basically days was 3, but new days was 100. So after this line, 100 is going to be assigned here. So basically it's like days equals to 100, right? So at the end of these 3 lines, what will happen is both new days and days, they will have the same value 100. So you can next selecting the variable name. There is some convention in PHP how to select the variable names. You can select just about any set of characters for a variable name, but there is some restriction. First of all, you have to use this $sign as the first character. And then you can use any letter or underscore as the second character. Okay. The variable names in PHP are case sensitive. So if you have something like this, say val and say val, these are like going to be 2 different variables. So this is important. For the functions, you remember that those were like case insensitive function names, but variable names are case sensitive. And one recommendation, this is an important recommendation here. So the recommendation is always select variable names that are self-descriptive. That means just by reading the variable name, you know what it is doing. Suppose you want a counter. So just name it $counter instead of $C or $CTR. And this also helps readability. Someone else, suppose you are working in a project and someone else looks at your code. If you just put this or this, it won't make much sense to him. So avoid this, rather keep this. Okay. Now, working with PHP variables. So, okay, let's talk about working with PHP string variables. So strings are actually collection of characters. Suppose this is a string variable name and we assign it a value. This whole name, this, you see, this is a collection of characters, right? So this is a string. How does PHP knows that this is a string or this is something else? In other languages, you put say int, then you say name equals to something, right? And sorry, int say n equals to 1. So you actually specifically mention that it's integer, or you put string, right? String name, something like that, right? String name equals to something. But in PHP, you don't mention any such thing. Everything just starts with the variable name. That's it. And then if you assign something like this, characters within double quotes, now the compiler automatically knows that this is a string. And these characters don't need to be together. So for the second example you see here, so within the double quote, this whole thing is one string. And although there is a white space here, okay? And now printing a string variable. So once you have done the assignment, how do you print it? It's simple. You can just use this echo print function and then name the variable. It will just do the printing for you. That's simple. But if you want to print the value of the string within a context, use the double quote marks. So that means, say you have this first name, right? You had this first name assigned as, say, first underscore name is equals to John, right? So you want to print, this one will print you John, right? But if you want to print, say, hello, John, how do you print it? Just do this, put the whole thing in the double quote as a parameter of echo. And the next thing you do is use this variable name, and PHP can automatically evaluate this as a variable and print it. So it will print you hello John. Okay, here is the thing. The important thing is you have to put this whole thing in the double quote. So let me show you one example. So here is one example. Say you see this is a PHP file. This one has three variables: first name, last name, and book. Okay, and this one knows that these three variables, the program will understand that these three variables are strings because the values are inside single quotes or double quotes, right? So these are three strings. Okay, next, what it's going to do is it's going to do a print. And you see the parameter for the print is inside double quote. You see that? And inside double quote, I can just put, this is putting some HTML code, but at the same time, you see these variables are also goes there. So what's going to happen is, since the whole thing is inside the double quote, these variables are going to be evaluated. These values are going to be evaluated. Let me show you here. I think it's going to be here. Yeah, so this is the example. So you see, we are sending this HTML value to the browser, but the whole thing is inside the double quote. So what it makes sure that if anything starts with a dollar, is going to be evaluated. So you see this one should evaluate to Murakami. This should be evaluated to Haruki. This should be evaluated to book. And not only that, this is going to be highlighted or boldened. So let's try to run this. So this is strings, right? Yeah. So you see, it says the book Kafka on the shore. So this is the first variable. And this one is italic, sorry, okay? Was written by Haruki Murakami. So Control-Shift-I, let's take a look at the code here. So you see this paragraph was sent by echo function, and the book, and this one, Kafka on the shore, is, this one was inside a variable. Now this is evaluated, was written by Haruki, was also a value of a variable, and Murakami was also a value assigned to a variable. Okay. Okay, so next let's talk about some string functions or string operators. First, concatenating strings. So the concatenation, that means concatenation means just adding two variables together. The operator for that is dot. That is the operator for concatenation. So here you see we have three variables: city, state, address, like three variables. The first two have two values, Magnolia and Arkansas. And the address, what the address does is it just, you see it here, right? It just uses this dot to concatenate these two operators, right? And so the address, or what you can do is you can just take the first variable and then concatenate it with a comma and then concatenate the second variable. Okay, so then it will look like Magnolia, comma, Arkansas. Concatenation works with strings or numbers. Here is one example. So you see here that this is one variable, right? And then we concatenate it with a comma, and then we use this dot to concatenate with the state variable. Then we use dot again. This is a empty space, and finally you see this is also a string, right? This is also a string. So here you have it concatenated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strings. But for the second example, you see this is a string, first string, second string, third string, fourth string, but the final one is a number. Okay, so this one will also work. Let me see if we have an example for that. I'm not sure if we have an example. Okay, so this is the example probably for that. Or this is another example. So here you see that we have this first name Melissa and last name. Both of these are like strings. And the author variable, it actually concatenates the first name with an empty space and then concatenates it with the last name. And finally, this one is printed and you see the author is going to be evaluated, right? So, and then there is another variable book. Okay, so let's run this. So the file name was concat. And now you see that Melissa, and then we have this space bank. This one was concatenated. And if I go here, you see this one was created by concatenating. Melissa bank was created by concatenating two of the variables using dot operator, right? So we use this dot operator and this dot operator. So this is the example that I just showed you. Next, let's talk about some string functions. So one of the string function is strlen. So this one gives you the length, how many characters you have in the string. You call the function, and inside the braces, you put the string name as a parameter. Or str to lower. This one will change the entire string to lowercase. This one is going to change the entire string to uppercase. These are built-in string functions. UC first, it capitalizes the first character. UC words capitalizes the first character of every word, and concatenation assignment. So you just concat and then assign it to a variable. Okay, so some number functions. These functions work on integer or floating point numbers, so number values. First, round function. This one rounds a decimal value to its nearest integer. So you see here, this variable is assigned a floating point value, right? So if you put a round function on it and then reassign it back, then it will be reassigned as 3, because 3.14 is rounded to 3. And then this round function can take like 2 parameters. By these, you mean that how many decimal places you want after the, how many decimal points you want. So if you have this floating point value and then you call this round on that variable, it will give you 3.143 and that will be assigned to n. Next comes the number format. This one does a formatting. It turns a number into more commonly written version. Can also be set as a specific number of 2 decimal points. So number format is, say if you assign this and then you do run a number format function on the variable, this one will just format it correctly. So 20,000 and then we'll have a comma and 943. You can call this number format with 2 parameters where you say that how many specific decimal places you want after the point. So this one will return it not only formatted, it will also return 2 places after 2 decimal places, up to 2 decimal places. Okay. So I think numbers.php, this one is an example. So if I do this, yeah. Oh, okay. So this one is going to apply some of these. So you see here, we have these quantity and price. Quantity is an integer here. Price is a floating point value, and then tax rate is another variable. This one is also a floating point. So this is the multiplication operator. So we multiply quantity with price and assign the value to total. And then we put some tax rate on total. So, and we multiply the total with the tax rate and add it to the total and assign the final value to the total. So after that, what we do is this one will probably give you a floating point value for the total after the calculation, but we just are interested about 2 decimal point values. So we call this number format. And finally, this total is going to be printed somewhere, yeah, here. Okay. So let's run this. Now you see we are purchasing 30 widgets at a cost of this each. We tax the total comes to, this is the total value. And you see after all the calculations and using this number format, 2 decimal point values are being displayed. And this is also formatted. You see that 3000, we have a comma after that. Okay. Okay, next let's talk about the constants. So far we had talked about the variables. We know that the variables are, obviously it means it stores data and the value may vary, right? So you see initially the total was this, and then we did some more calculation, the value of total changed, and then we called this function and the value of total was changed again. So that's why total was variable. The values kept on changing, right? The values kept on changing. Whereas a constant, for a constant, the names, as the name says, like it always remains, the value remains constant. The way you define a constant is using the define function. So define, it takes 2 parameters, name, the name of the constant and the value. And another thing is the constants are always names using all caps. And constant don't use initial $sign. And constants can only be assigned scalar values. So if you remember, we had these scalar values, right? So we had these 4 scalar values: Boolean, integer, floating points, and string. These 4 are scalar values. That means they have single value. Arrays and objects, they are multi-valued. So we cannot assign them, put them as constants. So yeah, so the constant can be assigned only singular values such as a string or number. A constant's value cannot be changed, obviously. A variable's value can be changed. Just in the previous example we showed you, but the constant value, we cannot change it. To print it, you have to put it within quotation marks. It's simple. So hello, and then you have to put the constant name. If you put it in the quotation marks, oh, sorry. Okay, so to print it, you cannot put it within the quotation marks. So if you put something like this, it's not going to work. It's going to show you hello username. Instead, you have to put it just separately. Say username, echo username, or you can put hello separately and then use this concatenation dot operator and then put the constant. So this is how you print it. So let me show you one example. So constants.php. So you see, we first define inside the PHP block, right? We first define a constant. The name of the constant is today, and the value is a string April 23, comma 2017. Okay, and then we want to print it, right? So you see this today, we put it here, right? So we put it here inside the echo. And here is one important thing. You see that we haven't put the whole echo thing like the previous examples. We haven't put the whole echo thing in a single quote or in a double quote. Rather, what we have done is we have put this part in a single quote and then concatenated it with the constant and then concatenated it with another part. And now you see this is another constant PHP version. This is a built-in constant. So this one was this today constant defined in this one was defined. But where does this PHP version, this constant come from? Well, this one is a built-in constant. Also PHP OS, this one is a built-in constant. Okay. So let's see. Let's run this. Okay, so now you see that today is this is printed and the server is running this version of PHP. This is the PHP version and PHP OS, WinNT operating system. Okay. And now an important topic, single versus double quotation mark. We already have seen if you have a variable, how can we print it, right? And we have seen that if you have a something like this, say, if you have a variable like this, and then if you put the variable with $sign inside the double quote, it gets evaluated, right? So if you do this, this will print this thing. So instead of this, you will see test because test was assigned to this. But the thing is, instead of single quote, if you use, sorry, instead of double quote, if you use single quote, what happens? You see this one, this echo does almost the same thing. The only difference is we use single quote. The difference is if you have a variable inside, then this is not going to be evaluated in this case. PHP will think it as literally. So it will print just this thing. This is an important thing to remember. Now, double quotation mark will replace a variable's name, which is value, obviously. Because of the double quotation mark, this one will be replaced with the value. And the single quote will display exactly what you type, except this and this. Okay. So except this and this. So what is going to, so this is going to print just a single quote, right? And this is going to print just this. Okay. So single quote is going to print everything literally except these two. For this one, This means I'm going to print this. And this one, it means I'm going to print this. So you see here we have three variables, quantity, price, and tax. We calculated the total, right? And then we did these printing thing just twice. And the same thing also twice again. The only difference is on the first two, we use double quotes, and the second two, we use single quotes, right? Okay, so the difference that is going to happen is, you see this variable total, right? So the total, we use this total here as well as here, right? But the thing is, let's see what result we see here. Okay, so now you see that on the first two lines, obviously this one didn't have any variables, this first line, so those two are actually being shown in a similar fashion. But this one and this one, the difference here was this one was in double quote, so everything was evaluated, you see that? But in the second one, this whole thing was in the single quote, so they took it literally. So quantity, price, total, everything was put literally. The other thing you see that we have this dollar sign again with the slash. The reason behind that is we had put this like, right? Yeah. And I told you that if I had something like this, then it will just print only this, right? The single quote is going to, or if I have something like this single quote. Now, let's do this and see what happens. Okay, so now you see this one only prints this and this one prints this, if you remember from the previous slide. So it prints single quotation, everything in within the single quotation is taken literally, except two things. Two escape sequences, it will print one, or escape sequence and the single quote will just print the single quote. Okay, so here is the escape sequences. So this one means double quotation marks, right? This one means single quotation mark. This one means backslash. This is new line, a carriage return, tab, and dollar sign. Okay. So here is one important tip. Because PHP will attempt to find variables within the double quotation mark, using the single quotation mark is theoretically faster. If you need to print the value of a variable, though, you must use double quotation mark. So here is your example. You see this one and this one actually does the same thing, right? Because there is no variable in any of these two lines. There is no variable. So which one I should use? Well, you should use this one. The reason is if there is no variable, this is faster because if you put a double quote, the compiler is going to carefully check if there is any variable in it. That is less efficient. But here, if you put like single quote, now it doesn't think about anything. It prints everything, literally everything. But if you want to really print the variable, say, if you want to do this, in that case, you should use double quote. So this is an important tip to remember. And the other thing is the valid HTML often includes a lot of double quote attributes. It's often easiest to use the single quotation marks. So let's say if you are familiar with HTML, obviously you are, because most of you already know about the client-side programming. So you remember that this is, suppose this one, I'm trying to send a like an text text area, right? Create a text area. So we are using this input HTML tag with type text, and the value has to be inside the double quote, right? So the thing is, if I want to send this thing, like do this thing, right? With a single quote, you see it's easy because inside the single quote, all the double quotes are like, okay, we have seen this before. But if I want to use double quotes, now I have to differentiate between these double quote and these double quote, right? So these double quote is the beginning of the whole thing, whereas this double quote, I want to keep it. This is not the beginning of anything. So for that, I have to use this slash, right? I have to use this slash. Okay, so if you want to do something like this, the wiser thing is using the single quote. So that you don't have to deal with every double quote that you want to be double quote. Okay. So that's more or less what we have in chapter 1. And thanks everyone for watching.